So our last speaker is Professor Ithamar Theodor. The title of his talk is Setting Concepts of God in the Bhagavad-gītā.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for organizing this wonderful conference, and thank Prima for so kindly supporting it. This paper is dedicated to the memory of Professor Klaus von Klostermeier, who's my first supervisor here in Oxford. Some of you knew him, and he passed away less than 3 months ago on February 26th, at the age of 90, so dedicated to his memory. I'll read, my accent is not that good, and therefore I can have it here also. The Bhagavad-gītā is one of the triple foundations of Vedanta known as Prasthana-Trayi, along with the Brahma Sutra and the Upanishads. Vedanta is the base for the mainstream of the Indian philosophical and mystical tradition, which refers to it as the source and ultimate authority. These papers engage with the concept of God in the Bhagavad-gītā and suggest that the various concepts of God correspond to various types of or levels of consciousness, defined as humanistic, yogic, and liberated. Subsequently, various concepts of God appeal to various persons according to their state of mind, their consciousness, or their existential states of being. However, before organizing the concepts of God in the Bhagavad-gītā into 3 hierarchical groups, as a prerequisite for this categorization, these papers engage with the nature of knowledge in the Bhagavad-gītā, which is hierarchical as opposed to argumentative. Vedanta knowledge in general, and specifically the jnana of the Bhagavad-gītā, generally considered intuitive, psychological, and mystical, and as such non-philosophical, devoid of rational structure. A recurrent argument as to why the Upanishads might not be considered philosophy is that they do not contain a unified or systematic position. This, however, largely reflects the composite and fragmented nature of the text. Moreover, the teachings portrayed in the Upanishads do not seem to make linear arguments that start with premises and lead to logical conclusions, but rather tend to make points through analogies and metaphors, with many core ideas presented as truth or insights known to particular teachers, not as logical propositions that can be independently verified. This paper argues that the Bhagavad-gītā's concept of jnana knowledge is systematic and unified, but as opposed to the generally accepted philosophical practice, which makes linear arguments that start with premises and build to logical conclusions, the Bhagavad-gītā's concept of jnana knowledge is not linear, but hierarchical, in that it leads to higher and higher states of being and consciousness, which could be considered mystical. Moreover, the Bhagavad-gītā has its own epistemic system, according to which it differentiates philosophical knowledge based upon linear arguments from mystical knowledge, which is considered in different terms. Before looking at the nature of Vedantic knowledge, a brief discussion of the Bhagavad-gītā's epistemology is offered. Epistemology is engaged with theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. The Bhagavad-gītā has its own epistemological assumptions, differentiating mystical or sattvic from argumentative and logistic categories of knowledge, and I quote, that's 18th chapter. Know that knowledge to be the nature of goodness, through which one sees a single imperishable reality in all beings, unified in a diversified. Know that knowledge to be the nature of passion, through which one sees through the vision a variegated reality of many souls in all beings. Apparently, the first category of knowledge, which is defined as sattvic or transparent, is the mystical category, referring to the Upanishadic type of knowledge. This type of knowledge is characterized by seeing single imperishable reality in all beings, unified in a diversified vision of the Atman and rebirth to the existence of Brahman and to other such visions. The second category or type of knowledge is defined as rajasic or passionate. This type of knowledge is characterized by seeing through the vision a variegated reality of many souls in all beings. Apparently, this vision of variegated reality underlies the philosophical argumentative method, making linear arguments that start with premises and build to logical conclusions. The conclusion of this short discussion is that it is indeed true that the mystical type of knowledge is not based upon arguments and counter-arguments, and from the Bhagavad-gītā's point of view, argumentative knowledge is a lower type of knowledge based upon a variegated perception of reality as opposed to a unified one. The question may be raised, how can this non-argumentative Vedantic knowledge be categorized or defined? In general, Upanishadic texts were often called rahasya or secret, as they were supposed to be learned only by especially selected students, which explains their often less well-preserved state of transmission. These deal with eternal problems of humankind, that is, where we come from and why are we here, where did we go, in other words, the nature of body and soul, their fate after a death, and their position in the universe. Klaus Klostermaier considered it very difficult to express Vedanti knowledge or the way leading to it, as knowledge and a way in the Indian understanding have stages, not set side by side, but within each other, in depth, within consciousness itself. Its aim is to reach reality itself, not to abstract a concept from it. This means the training not only of the mind, but the development of a lifestyle of inwardness from within, which life then develops in a new way, whose knowledge is simply incommensurable with the knowledge achieved through sense perception and abstraction from it. Human existence has not only a horizontal historical dimension, but a vertical, non-historical dimension as well. To cope with actual human existence, this movement toward the center, that taking of a level of consciousness of the self, is indispensable. Upanishadic thinking rests and is static as far as outward movement and change in topic is concerned. For people unused to probing the depth of this vertical movement, does not read further and is considered uninteresting. There's no visible progress and one needs time and patience. Considering all the above said, it is evident that this type of knowledge should not be considered in linear terms, as these terms fail to grasp its essence and its movement towards internalization and or ascension of consciousness toward higher mystical states. As such, we propose to categorize this type of knowledge in hierarchical terms, which are inherent in the Vedantin mode of discourse. These terms may well grasp the ascending movement of this type of knowledge and can articulate it in generally accepted philosophical terms. The idea of reality divided into grades, some of them being obscured and concealed and not perceived by the senses, or perhaps perceived but given a different interpretation, is the heart of the Vedantin mysticism. Apparently, this idea of divided reality containing different realms seems to be grounded already in the Upanishads. According to Brian Black, in its earliest textual context, the word Upanishad takes on a meaning similar to Bandhu, describing a connection between things, often presented in a hierarchical relationship. In this context, Upanishad designates equivalence between components of different realms of reality that were not considered to be observable by the senses, but remain concealed and obscured and required special knowledge for understanding. Shlomo Biderman recognized two principal metaphysical positions in Indian philosophy, which he designates as direct realistic and the hierarchical. These two positions or perceptions differ by their perception of reality. The former considers reality to be unified, whereas the latter considers reality to contain differing levels or tiers. Moreover, these tiers, the levels of floors, are designated as lower and higher. I'm currently taking the supreme reality of Brahman as the reference point. The closer the perception is to Brahman, the higher it is. He writes that in general, one can find two principal metaphysical positions in Indian philosophy, the realistic or direct position and the hierarchical position. The direct realistic position assumes that reality is unified, that is, does not contain divisions or layers. As such, it is subject to direct human recognition and should not be submitted to different interpretations. The hierarchical position assumes that reality is not unified, rather contains differing levels or tiers. There is a higher or superior reality and a lower or inferior reality, and one must distinguish between absolute and relative reality. The concept of hierarchical reality, containing different realms not observable by the senses, but requiring special knowledge or understanding, is rooted not only in the Vedantin tradition, but also in the yoga tradition as well. Ian Witcher writes that within the context of yoga, hierarchical maps of reality serve a very practical, psychological, pedagogical, and soteriological purpose. The categories used in yoga are both descriptions and contemplative directives for the ways in which the mind, identity, and world are actually experienced through meditative awareness and insight. Yoga philosophy, being historically rooted in the pedagogical context, functions in part as a teaching method skillfully aimed at transforming, purifying, and illuminating human consciousness and thus our perception and experience of reality. Apparently, the yogic tendency to divide reality into layers or maps serve not only as philosophical purpose, but a very practical, psychological, pedagogical, and soteriological purpose as well. Practical, as it helps differentiate the different layers, psychological, as it adheres to different states of mind, and pedagogical, and soteriological, as it aspires to teach and direct one towards a soteriological goal. I lead one towards liberation, which will more expand on this and write, following the yoga psycho-ontology, a hierarchy of body, senses, mind, intellect, and soul, and the spirit biotic is set up. Transcendence requires disassociation from each level and detachment from the respective fruits. Apparently, the idea of hierarchical reality is grounded in the hierarchy of body, senses, mind, intellect, and soul, or self, and represents different stages or states of awareness or consciousness. Apparently, the senses are able to perceive certain aspects of reality. The mind can perceive higher aspects, the intelligence can perceive aspects which are still higher, and the highest aspects of reality can perceive directly by the soul or the Atman. Considering all the above said, we propose a metaphysical division of the Bhagavad-gītā's underlying reality into three realms or tiers as follows. 1, the humanistic realm of Dharma. 2, the spiritualistic realm of Yoga. 3, the liberated realm of Moksha. In the first tier, that of Dharma, the general rule in terms of values is to prosper. That such worldly happiness and prosperity are desired and good. In terms of being, the individual is defined in this tier as a human being or any other living being, such an animal, plant, or other. In the first floor, as the first floor is humanistic, the notions of divinity are seen from the point of view of Dharma, i.e., a vision of divinity which furthers prosperity and supports Dharma. In this category, we have sections from the 3rd and 4th chapters. The first section looks at abstract divinity, i.e., Brahman, as the source of Dharma. I quote from the 3rd chapter. Dharmic activity is born of Brahman, which is in the Veda, and Brahman springs from the eternal Om. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahman is eternally present in the sacrifice. Apparently, in this section, divinity is described in abstract terms as Brahman, which is said to be present in the sacrifice, thus awarding the Vedic sacrificial activity the presence of divinity. The second section is the first instance in the Bhagavad-gītā where Krishna hints at his own divinity as the object of surrendering all activities and a teacher whose teaching can release one from the bondage of karma. 330, surrendering all your activities unto me with mind fixed on the highest self and without desire and avoiding possessiveness, cast apathy aside and fight. Those who always follow this doctrine of mine while being faithful and eschewing envy, they too are released from their karma bondage. But those who reject my teachings out of envy and thus do not practice them are deluded in all their knowledge. Know that these fools are lost. That's Gita 30, chapter 3, 32. The third section follows soon after, and here the avatar doctrine is articulated. Accordingly, the Supreme Person descends to this world not to establish Dharma and destroy Adharma. Moreover, this famous section also reinforces the idea that the Supreme is the creator of the fourfold social division into Divarnas. That's fourth chapter. The blessed Lord said, many births have I passed, and so did you, O Arjuna. I know all of them, but you know not, O Parantapa. Although I was never born, and I myself am imperishable, and although I am the Lord of all beings, when I take on material nature that I own and control, I come into being through my own supernal power. Indeed, whenever a decline in Dharma occurs and a surge of Dharma, then I myself appear to rescue the good and the pious, to destroy the evildoers, to establish Dharma. I myself descend age after age. I have created the four social classes according to the divisions of the gunas and modes of work. Although I am the creator of the system, know that I am forever a non-doer. So that's fourth chapter of Bhagavad-gītā. Krishna now propounds a famous avatar theme. Whenever Dharma is weakened or harmed and Adharma is on the rise, there and then himself appears. The purpose of his appearance is the re-establishment of Dharma, the protection of the pious and destruction of the evildoers. At last, he declares that the Varna system, which is an essential component of Dharma, is of a divine origin. Father Martin refers to this section and writes that from chapter 4, Krishna begins to reveal his divine nature to Arjuna. He is not simply a man like others, but descends from a lineage of spiritual teachers and is of a high yogic attainment. Remembering all his past birth and being born, not due to action karma as Arjuna was, but due to his own volition and his magical powers, Maya. His ability to use material creation as means to manifest himself shows that Krishna, the supreme deity, the highest God who controls the universe, he manifests himself in times of trouble and virtue dharma when virtue dharma is on the decline. Although the text does not use the term incarnation or descent, avatara, which were to become popular later in the traditions of the god Vishnu, this is clear indication that Krishna appears in the world for the sake of righteousness, or more specifically to correct teachings and have decayed over time, teachings that have decayed over time. In summary, the first floor concept of divinity serve as religious inspiration for the reinforcement of Dharma, and are perceived by those possessing a first-tier consciousness. Now, second-tier concept. In the second tier, the value of worldly prosperity is rejected in favor of non-attachment to the world and indifference to both worldly happiness and worldly distress, along with yoking oneself to higher reality, that of moksha. In terms of being, the individual person does not consider himself or herself any longer a human or other being, but as an eternal spiritual soul bound by the laws of samsara. Thus, the individual's subjective identity is not any longer that of a human being, rather that of an eternal spiritual soul or self. As the second floor is characterized by yoga, the concepts or other visions of divinity are meditational. I represent deep yogic meditation and supply objects to be meditated upon at the time of death. The following section clearly offers such images of the Supreme Person as objects of such meditation. This is 8th chapter. On Partha, he who meditates on the Supreme Divine Person through constant yogic practice with an unswerving consciousness goes to him. One should meditate on him as the ancient seer, as a controller, as smaller than the atom, as a supporter for all, as having an inconceivable form, as brilliant as the sun, and by your darkness, his mind in wavering, absorbing devotion, supported by the strength of yoga, his life air focused between the eyebrows. One who is thus established in the hour of death reaches that supreme divine person. The following section is not exactly a description of the Supreme Person, but is a description of the Supreme Abode, to be achieved after a successful death. And in that sense, it is also a yogic concept, preparing one for the moment of death. That's 8th chapter. Yet there also exists another state, unmanifest and eternal, which is higher than the former, the unmanifest state. Where all beings perish, that state does not itself perish. It is said to be eternal as well as imperishable, and they declare to be the supreme destination. Upon reaching it, none returns here. That is my supreme goal. That Supreme Person is attainable by single-minded devotion. Within him, all beings exist, and in him, everything is pervaded. The following section is rather mystical description of divinity. First, it refers to the abstract Brahman. I shall now speak about the object of knowledge, knowing which you shall attain the eternal. This is the beginningless Brahman and subordinate to me. It is said to have neither existence nor non-existence. In general, Brahman denotes abstract and impersonal divinity. Its canonical definition is given in the Brahma Sutra 112, derived from the Taittiriya Upanishad 311, and repeated in the Bhagavad Purana 111, as that from which proceed the creation, sustenance, and destruction of beings. It is thus the most general ontological principle, and in theistic Vedanta, it is also identified with personal divinities such as Vishnu or Krishna. The text commences to describe the Paramatma, which is a personal form of divinity residing within the heart, known also as Antaryami, and accompanying the embodied soul in its voyage to the world of samsara, 13th chapter. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, and similarly its ears which exist everywhere in the world. As such, he is all-encompassing and aware of everything. Although devoid of perceptible qualities, he appears to possess them. Although he maintains everything, he is unattached to anything. He is free from the gunas, but nevertheless experiences the gunas. He exists inside and outside of all creatures. He is unmoving and moving. His subtlety makes him difficult to comprehend. He is at once remote and nearby. Although he seems to be divided among beings, he is actually undivided. He is to be known as the maintainer, devourer, and creator of all creatures. It is said that he is the light of lights, situated by all darkness. He is knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the goal of knowledge. He abides in everyone's heart. This interesting idea is also encountered in the Upanishads, and it makes an important contribution to the diverse concept of divinity found in the Bhagavad-gītā. This form usually associated with yogic or mystic contemplation, and naturally evokes serene and peaceful moods, which are representative of quietistic and mystic states of mind. According to Vaishnava theology, the Antaryami, or inner ruler, is a form of deity that dwells in the human heart, guides it and accompanies it through experience of heaven and hell. The Katha Upanishad, chapter 4, describes the personalized divinity quite explicitly. A person the size of a thumb resides within the body Atman, the Lord of what was and what will be, from him, he does not hide himself, so it is that. The person the size of a thumb is like a fire free of smoke, the Lord of what was and what will be, the same today and tomorrow, so indeed is that. The Shvetara Upanishad, chapter 4, describes the relation of the two souls, the minute and supreme, as two birds nestling on the same tree. Two birds who are companions and friends nestle on the very same tree. One of them eats a tasty fig, the other not eating looks on. Stuck on the very same tree, the person grieves, deluded by her who is not the Lord, but when he sees the other, the contented Lord, and the Lord's majesty, his grief disappears. The Paramatman is a sort of personal providence who rules, guides, and accompanies the Atman in its journey through samsara, as he escorts every living being separately and witnesses its deeds. He is said to possess thousands of arms and legs. He is subtle and unseen. It is said that he is very close, but at the same time hard to reach. The person within the heart is a divine manifestation, which encompasses both personal and impersonal traits. The Paramatman is personal in the sense of having personal features, such as majestic form, while his impersonal aspect is expressed by his being ubiquitous. In summary, the second floor concepts of divinity serve as objects of yogic meditation, and as such, preparing one for the time of death. Third tier. The third tier contains the most theologically rich concept of divinity. Having gradually ascended through the first and second tiers, these descriptions serve to establish Arjuna firmly in the third tier state, so that he will not descend back again, rather remain on that existential platform. The third floor is rich with theological descriptions of divinity, whether these refer to Supreme as Krishna, the personal God, to an immanent concept of divinity, the various manifestations to the universal person, or to Brahman, then personal divinity. Jonathan Edelman, writes that the Bhagavad-gītā, God can be discussed as an individual being with distinct qualities, body with specific features, a name, and so forth. And God also can be discussed as beyond such descriptions, as a pure being, unqualified by attributes. While terms Brahman and Krishna can be used interchangeably, for the most part, Brahman refers to a non-dual, unqualified reality that transcends the vicissitudes of time and space, yet dwells in and pervades all reality. Krishna, on the other hand, is the qualified, transcendent, ultimate personal being who freely descends to the world and self-reveals. The main third floor theological descriptions are to be found in the Gita's central section comprised of chapters 7 to 12. It is in these chapters that the text goes beyond discussion of dharma, beyond the level of yoga, reincarnation and mental restraint, and offers various visions of the Supreme, or what we call third tier vision. In the third tier, the idea values the experience of Brahma Ananda, or the bliss of Brahman. Alternatively, deep emotions of love and subordination directed toward the Supreme Person. Thus, the perceptions of indifference and non-attachment of the second tier are replaced by deep attachment to the Supreme Person and deep love expressed by loving feelings towards him. Alternatively, the bliss of Brahman or Brahma Ananda. The opening verse of chapter 7 is significant and hints at the discussion's ascension from the second to the third tier. This high point of view no longer propounds knowledge of yoga and sensual restraint, but knowledge of a Supreme Person and devotion unto him, seen from a liberated point of view. The first characteristic of this new and higher state is Maya Sakta Manaha, literally mean with your mind attached to me. One important element of this framework is offered right at the beginning. Angelica Marinar considered that at this point, Krishna announces that he will teach Arjuna how to turn yogi detachment into attachment to him alone. The word Sakta is significant and means attachment. In his commentary on the first verse of the 7th chapter, Zehner refers to exchange a point of view and remarks that attach your mind to me is utterly new and apparently at variance with the whole content of the last 2 chapters. We have been told that liberation is clearly incompatible with attachment of any kind. Here, however, Arjuna is told that he must attach his whole personality in all its newfound fullness and freedom to Krishna, who is God, and being God, transcends the immortal Brahman as much as he transcends the phenomenal world. The text then proceeds to highlight the immanent concept of divinity seen through nature. I read from 7th chapter. Oh, the Nanjaya, there exists nothing higher than me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung of thread. I am taste of water, the syllable omni of the Vedas, the sovereign ether, and humanity in man. the pure fragrance of the earth, and I, the brilliance of fire, I am the life of all living beings and austerity of the ascetics. Know me, Partha, to be the primeval seed for creatures, the wisdom of the wise, and the splendor of the splendid, and of the mighty I am the might, devoid of lust and passion, that desire in all creatures. I am I, which is not inconsistent with the dharma of our Shabbat. Not all states of being characterized by sattva, rajas, or tamas have their source in me alone, but I am not in them, rather they are in me. The entire world is divided by the three states of being produced by the gunas, and thus fails to recognize me when eternally above them. Divine indeed and difficult to penetrate is my deluding power, consisting of the three gunas, but those who have surrendered unto me alone, they can transcend it. Krishna now offers a mystical vision according to which he underlies the whole of creation and is very close. He offers various tangible examples which demonstrate the sense in which he is so close and underlies everything, such as the taste of water, humanity in the human person, the pure fragrance of the earth, the splendor of the splendid, and the mind devoid of lust and passion. According to Marina, the ninth and subsequent chapters present the theological basis for Krishna's revelation as the highest and the one and only God who not only creates, protects, and withdraws from the world, but also transcends it as the ever-liberated highest self. Krishna opens the ninth chapter by complimenting Arjuna for his lack of envy, the qualification based upon which he is able to acquire the knowledge about to be delivered. This is perceived or grasped directly by means of pratyaksha or direct perception. It may well be that this kind of pratyaksha is a direct experience or vision of divinity, as may also be expressed by the term darshana. From the viewpoint of this tier, there exist those who serve the Supreme Person without jealousy and are devoted to him, and those, on the other hand, they are faithless, skeptics, and cynics, are doomed to drown in the ocean of samsara. Another notable feature of this tier is that one's identity is constructed by his or her relationship with the Supreme Person. This is different from the first tier, where identity is constructed and defined through adherence to dharma, or from the second tier, where identity is constructed through self-restraint and detachment. As it is the personal relationships with the Supreme Person which enable one to get established in the third tier. He who is not jealous of the Supreme Person, who has faith in him, and is devoted to him, comes closer to him, and free from inauspiciousness, and ultimately attains moksha. Naturally, the opposite is true as well. It seems that in the following section, Krishna offers Arjuna a vision of darshana through a direct experience. Having ceased to present rational arguments, Arjuna does not argue, no questions any longer. Rather, it seems that he is fascinated by the might of a divine vision revealed to him. He listens carefully to Krishna's words and simply absorbs what he hears. 9.4. I pervade the entire world in my unmanifest form. All beings rest in me, but I do not rest in them. And yet all beings do not rest in me. See my mystic splendor. I sustain beings, but rely not on them. My very self is the cause of their being. As the great wind that goes everywhere is eternally contained within space, know that similarly all beings are contained in me. The Supreme Person is simultaneously immanent and transcendent. Being immanent, the Supreme is very close. He's present everywhere in his invisible form, and all living entities are not only supported by him, but are controlled by him through the agency of nature, which is supervising. The entire world is contained within him, just as the wind is contained within space. But at the same time, the various entities do not rest upon him directly, but are helplessly controlled by nature. Nevertheless, he maintains a distinct and separate mode of existence, while resting on his nature alone, indifferent and unattached to world activities and the gunas. Viewed thus, the world is directly ruled by nature, and only indirectly governed by the Supreme. These significant theological statements point to a rich and complex source of divinity hereby presented. According to chapter 10, the Supreme Person cannot be empirically known, since he is the source of everything. Therefore, one must rely on the Supreme himself in order to know him. Acceptance of the Supreme Person as the source of everything represents a state of enlightenment, and those who are thus enlightened are wholeheartedly devoted to him. It seems that this state of perception is not the result of a detached, logical, or scholarly inquiry, rather a type of knowledge resulting from dependence upon and dedication to the Supreme Person. This revelation of God in the self might be called the highest wisdom, corresponding to the highest love and loyalty to God, mentioned in 1854. Here are excerpts from the 10th chapter, opening section. The Blessed Lord said, Again, Almighty Arjuna, as you are near to me, please hear my supreme words spoken for your benefit. Neither the host of gods nor the great sages know my origin, for in every respect I am the soul of the gods and of the sages. You knows me as the unborn, the beginningless, and the great ruler of the world, that undeluded among mortals is free from all sins. I am the source of all that exists. From me everything emanates. The enlightened who thus know me, worship me with all their hearts. Krishna explains to Arjuna how he can be known. As such, he describes various states of existence, as well as the ancient sages and manus who formed the population of the universe were generated, all of them originating from him. Malina writes that the present 10th chapter explains the ubiquity of the God's power, Vibhuti, through the enumeration of the individual power manifestations in different realms of the cosmos, such as the elements, social groups, gods, sages, animals, abstract principles. In this way, the relationship between the unseen dimension of Krishna being and his manifest perceptible presence is put into more concrete terms. In summary, third floor concepts of divinity are rich and variegated and serve to establish one in the liberated third floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ithamar. So we have time for questions.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask, maybe for personal reasons, I like to take advantage of your scholarly leaders. Why does envy matter when it comes to moksha? Like, why is that highlighted as the feature that Arjuna lacks, and that's why he couldn't achieve moksha?
Well, it's considered to be a kind of an impurity, tamasic. It involves a notion of ego. It has to be egoistic, and everyone is self-centered. It looks, it's an unmistakable way of looking at things.
So
But,
this aspect and do that.
yeah,
Okay.
tamasic, and if you look at the metaphysics of liberation, if you look at the 8 elements, you see that you have the mirror, tone, and all the various elements, and then you have ahankara, ego, and to kind of become liberated, one has to give up that very small element of ego, which can be kind of strengthened, I would say.
Thank you.
Reinforces people as well.
One more question.
Thank you. For a good, interesting paper. Do you think that these tiers or realms, they correspond to conceptions of God? I'm thinking of
Sections,
conceptions of God, because in Jiva Goswami's his Bhagavad-gītā, at the beginning of the Bhagavad-gītā, he seems to be arguing that the different yogas, karma, jnana, and bhakti yoga, are taken up by people of different dispositions. And when they take up that yoga, it also reveals a particular aspect of the non-dual being of God. Is this your understanding of the Gita as well? So someone that is on the Dharma realm has a particular concept.
Something like that it's not an objective description of God, but the way we humans perceive divinity or God in different ways according to our state of being. And what I'm saying is that there are various levels of tiers in the Gita. And if I understand right, and I wish I would have known Jiva Goswami's better, manifestations of concept of divinity are there through the lens of one's situation, svabhava. And one svabhava will determine whether one is doing karma yoga or bhakti yoga or jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga. But I think it seems to be a similar idea that it's our lens or perspectives or limitations through which we see divinity. And the higher we go, the higher levels of divinity we can perceive. And according to our existential state, that's the way we perceive the God. So I think it corresponds, it seems to be corresponding.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. So we speak about those different levels of reality, right? I think we use this word, and you also speak about different concepts of God in the Gita, right? So, but it seems there might be, and there is for sure an ambiguity in the use of the word concept or conception, because we can use it in a kind of epistemological way, the way I understand something, right? And it seems to me that's the way you use the word, right? Because there's those layers, and in each one of those layers, God will be seen in a different way. So it's like a subjective understanding. But there's also another way to use the same word, concept, is perhaps, I suppose, the way people use in philosophy of religion. Is, of course, is a concept, is something that we conceptualize, but it has a kind of ontological goal. When we speak about the concept of God, of course, people who speak about the concept of God, they believe that God exists. And so we're saying that God has those features. Say, for instance, say that in my concept of God, I say that God has, I don't know, 10 properties or attributes and so on and so forth. So I'm perhaps claiming that if God exists, he would have, or she would have, those attributes. So it's a kind of realist use of the word concept. So I just put those two, just to make sure which is your approach. Is that more like subjective way or more ontological and realist way?
In a sense, I started the paper by bringing the Gita's own epistemology. That was one of my opening sections. And very clearly, the 18th chapter differentiate these two types of knowledge. From Rajasic knowledge, which basically is based upon divisions and arguments, and sattvic knowledge, which is mystical and unified. So I think my understanding is that to understand the Gita's epistemology, you have to see the Gita's terms. Really, that's the way I think to seek to understand the terms in which the Gita differentiates these categories of knowledge. There's also Tamasic knowledge, which I didn't deal with because it's not really relevant. But I was just referring to differentiating sattvic and Rajasic knowledge. But yeah, I think the Gita brings it back to the reader and asks, what is your state of mind? From your state of mind, I tell me what your state of mind is, and according to that, you will get the revelation. It's kind of I read the Gita differently. I mean, if I would have come from a philosophical point of view, I would say, okay, let's say, look at the Gita. Now we're objective, and let's look at the Gita as an object and analyze it. And the way I see the Gita is that it kind of brings it back to us and asking us, what is your state of mind? According to your state of mind, I will show you the knowledge. So yes, there's an epistemic theory here. It is subjective. If you want to use the word subjective, yes, it is subjective. Yeah, I think that it's true that this kind of reading is subjective because it's according to the subject, which is me, the way I see the Gita.
We have time for perhaps one. Okay.
This is a follow-up to that. So at least some philosophers have tried to combine this to maybe seeing those conceptions of concepts. So John Rawls talks about like conceptions of the good, and he just seems to distinguish that from like the more generic shared concept of the good. And so like a conception is one plausible, I think it is his understanding is one plausible specification of a more generic concept. And so my sense, Ithamar, is if I'm going to interpret what you're saying in response to the question would be or what the Gita is saying is like there's an ascension through sort of more sophisticated conceptions that are all ultimately they're all aspects or plausible specifications of the like really generic concept of God, but there is an ascent to like a truer conception. Is that right?
Yeah, there's certainly this is part of my argument. It's actually part of my bigger argument about the Gita, that the Gita is constructed on levels and there's kind of a hierarchy and a ladder going on. And I'm trying to argue or show the full picture of ascent, all the way from bottom to up. I'm not sure Rhodes would agree with the Gita's metaphysics. That probably he would have had different metaphysics, but if you look at the whole picture of the release from samsara, the soul, and all that, and that's what I'm trying to show. That there's actually a whole structure here, and in that, concepts of God are also arranged according to one's existential state. That's basically what I'm saying.
I guess I just need, so like in one answer you could then give directly to the prior. It's like it isn't a real choice.
But I think the specifications, they should be consistent with each other, right?
Rawls doesn't think so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like you can have we can talk about it later.
Okay, sure.
I studied Rhodes and Manigrat or something. I don't remember.
Thank you for this really wonderful presentation. I like the way you presented the Gita. It illuminated the text for me a lot more. Question. Would it, your presentation of the hierarchy between the two levels of knowledge, the Rajasic one and the Sattvic one, you said the Rajasic one was argumentative or rational, and the Sattvic one mystical. Would it be accurate? Am I understanding it right? Where if I describe that, the way I understand it is the argumentative one, the lower level, is a knowledge. They're both giving knowledge, so they're both giving truth. But the argumentative one is giving truth of knowledge of facts. I know that so and so is the case. Kind of like the ontological argument with Anselm. He derived the truth of God through a rational process. So he knew a fact that a certain being existed. Whereas a mystical option, at that level, it's not about knowledge of facts, it's about knowledge of the object itself. So you actually know God, him or herself. Is that an accurate depiction of the two levels? One is direct contact with the object of knowledge, and the other is just knowledge of the fact about that object.
I think the technique of getting knowledge is different. The lower one, the Rajasic, would be knowledge from the vision. I mean, that's the verse. Negation and the vision. Basically academic knowledge. Arguing, negating, this is this and this is that. Dividing the world into plurality and differentiating east and west, south and north, black and white, and so forth, and building arguments to connect them. Whereas the mystical knowledge is unifying, like you get these visions of the soul and the gunas, that's unifying. Looking through all the bodies, human beings, flowers, flies, they're all encaged atmans in bodies. So that would be like a unifying knowledge, non-argumentative. And Rajasic knowledge would be like dividing and building up theories and creating categories. Basically, Aristotelian knowledge, basically building categories, negating academic knowledge.
And would you say a vision, sorry, just really quickly, a vision of, say I have a mystical experience of myself as a soul, as being distinct from matter. Isn't that a division then?
Yes, that's, but also in the mystical sense, you can have the distinctions, it's not all one.
Okay.
But it's a different system of getting to knowledge, a different epistemic system. While the Rajasic knowledge will grasp, will build itself upon the visions, that is kind of a peaceful, sattvic, meditational, darshana state. It's a mystical state. That's the real definition. Going up, that's what I'm trying to show. That between the 6th chapter and 7th chapter, Arjuna stops arguing. Before he argues, he asks questions. End of the 6th chapter, he said that what happens if someone practices yoga and he's not successful? What will happen to me there? And this and that. What about the mind? He's arguing. He's questioning. And then in the 7th chapter, is kind of being pacified, and he starts seeing. And then Krishna says, "I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and moon, the fragrance of the earth." And he starts looking. It's a different way of absorbing. He's above the argumentative realm, and he enters into a darshan, into a vision. Krishna speaks and he just hears.
Thank you, that's very good.
Okay, thank you very much.